There is a photograph that broke the Turkish internet. Two people, standing in a voting line at an ordinary school in Istanbul, not on a red carpet, not in front of cameras arranged by a publicist, just two former co-stars running into each other by chance. They embraced. They smiled. And within hours, millions of people who had spent years hoping for exactly this moment lost their minds completely. But here is the thing nobody was talking about. One of those two people was married. He had a daughter. And somewhere across the city, his wife was watching the same viral clip that everyone else was watching. That is the story we are telling today. Not the fantasy version. The real one. The one that involves a decade of rumors, a marriage that the tabloids declared dead before it had even started to crack, and two careers that became permanently tangled together whether either person wanted that or not. This is the story of Barış Arduç Elçin Sangu, and the kind of public pressure that can bend even the strongest relationships until something has to give. To understand why any of this matters, you have to go back to 2015. Turkish television was producing romantic comedies the same way it always had, warm, predictable, pleasant. And then a show called Kiralik Ask, which translates to Love for Rent, arrived and quietly changed the rules. The premise was not revolutionary. A young woman named Daphne, broke and desperate, agrees to a scheme where she pretends to make a cold, emotionally unavailable shoe designer named Omer fall in love with her. Classic setup. The kind of plot that has existed in 100 different forms across 100 different cultures. What nobody predicted was the chemistry. Barış Arduç, born in Switzerland and raised in Turkey, had been working steadily since 2011. He was talented, obviously, but he had not yet had a role that showed the full range of what he could do. Elçin Sangu, born in Istanbul in 1987, was in a similar position. She was known, respected, but not yet iconic. Kiralik Ask changed both of those things simultaneously, and it changed them because of what happened between these two actors the moment the cameras started rolling. There is something that experienced directors talk about when they describe rare on-screen chemistry. It is not physical attraction, though that can be part of it. It is a quality of genuine listening. When two actors are truly present with each other, when one speaks and the other actually hears them rather than waiting for their own cue, the camera catches something that cannot be manufactured. Audiences feel it without being able to name it. They lean forward. They stop scrolling. They tell their friends. That is what happened with Barış and Elçin in Kiralik Ask. Their Omer and Daphne became one of the most beloved couples in the history of Turkish television. The show was broadcast not just across Turkey but in dozens of countries. Fan communities formed in languages neither actor could speak. And with all of that devotion came the inevitable question that fans always ask when the on-screen magic feels too real to be performance alone. Were they actually together? Here is where the story gets complicated, because the honest answer in 2015 and 2016 was no, and the honest answer today is still no, they were never romantically involved. But the space between the honest answer and what the public believed was enormous, and that gap created a mythology that has never fully dissolved. What was actually happening behind the scenes during Kiralik Ask was more interesting than a secret romance. Barış Arduç had already begun what would become one of the most enduring relationships in Turkish showbiz, and he had found it not on the set of a sweeping romantic drama, but in a low-budget comedy about a clumsy girl causing chaos everywhere she went. In 2014, Barış appeared in a film called Deliha alongside an actress and comedian named Gupsozi. Gups was different from every woman he had worked with before. She was sharp, genuinely funny, unafraid of looking ridiculous, and completely unbothered by the image management games that defined so much of celebrity culture. On a set where Barış was presumably the leading man, Gups stole every scene she was in and somehow made everyone around her better in the process. They fell in love during filming. They kept it quiet, the way both of them have always kept everything quiet, but word eventually got out. And here is the painful irony of what happened next. As Barış and Gups were quietly building something real, the world was becoming completely convinced that Barış and Elçin were secretly building something too. The fan pressure during Kiralik Ask was extraordinary. If Barış posted a photo, fans would analyze it for clues about Elçin. If Elçin gave an interview, every word about her personal life was scrutinized for hidden meaning. Award ceremonies became exercises in watching where the two actors stood relative to each other, how long they held eye contact, whether their body language revealed something their words were careful to conceal. Barış and Elçin handled this with more grace than most people in their position would have managed. They were warm and professional with each other in public. They acknowledged the chemistry without encouraging the fantasy. When Kiralik Ask ended its run in 2017, they went their separate ways with what appeared to be genuine affection and mutual respect, which in some ways only made the fans more convinced that something significant had happened between them. Meanwhile, Barış and Gups continued their relationship without making it a public performance. They appeared together when they wanted to. They were photographed occasionally. But they did not turn their love into content, which in the era of social media is practically a revolutionary act. They married in July 2020 in a small ceremony in Sezim, a coastal town in Izmir. The wedding was quiet, deliberately so. No massive guest list, no splashy magazine coverage, no carefully coordinated announcement. They simply got married, and then they continued living their lives. In September 2022, they welcomed a daughter named Janasia. By any measure, they were one of the most stable and genuinely private couples in Turkish entertainment. But stability and privacy are not the qualities that generate headlines. And what happened next demonstrated just how completely the public narrative of a celebrity couple can diverge from the actual reality of their lives. Sometime in early 2025, Turkish tabloid media began running stories suggesting that Barış and Gups were in crisis. The evidence cited was striking in how thin it was. The couple had not been photographed together recently. They were not tagging each other in social media posts. Various unnamed sources suggested tension. Some outlets went further, pointing to the fact that Barış had been filming a new project, a Turkish adaptation of the Korean drama Queen of Tears called Ask v Gözyaşı, co-starring the enormously popular actress Hande Erçel. The argument, made with minimal supporting evidence, was that the intense romantic scenes required for the production had created friction at home. Then, as often happens in the ecosystem of celebrity gossip, the Elçin Sangu thread was woven back in. Because here is the thing about a mythology that has had a decade to develop. It does not require new evidence to stay alive. It only requires a fresh crisis to attach itself to. Suddenly old clips of Barış and Elçin from Kiralik Ask were circulating again alongside the divorce rumors. Articles that framed the entire situation as a love triangle appeared in multiple languages. The story that fans had always wanted to believe, that Barış had never fully let go of his Defne, that his marriage to Gups had always been second best, was being presented as though it were analysis rather than fantasy. The reality, according to every credible source that actually investigated the situation, was considerably less dramatic. Close sources told reporters that the couple was simply busy. Barış was working. Gups was working. They had a young daughter. They had not been photographed together because they were not in the habit of staging public appearances for the benefit of people who had decided their marriage was in trouble. The moment that effectively ended the divorce speculation, at least temporarily, was small enough to seem almost comic in retrospect. Barış Arduç posted on his Instagram page. He shared something related to Gups' new project. He added an emoji. That was it. That was the entire gesture. And yet that single supportive post, that tiny digital signal of a husband paying attention to his wife's work, was enough to shift the tide of coverage. Fans who had been anxious breathed out. The tabloid cycle moved on. But the moment that has lived longest in the public memory, the one that keeps getting pulled back into circulation whenever someone wants to argue that this story is not over, happened at a polling station. At some point after the divorce rumors had peaked and subsided, Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu happened to be at the same place at the same time. An ordinary civic moment. They saw each other. They embraced with the warmth of two people who share a significant chapter of professional history and have always genuinely liked each other. Someone nearby filmed it. The footage spread across Turkish social media and then into international fan communities with the speed that only truly anticipated content achieves. Fans of Kiralik Ask flooded the comments with nostalgia. The hashtags associated with their characters came back to life. People who had watched the show a decade earlier went back and rewatched their favorite scenes. And sitting somewhere in the middle of all this loving chaos was the actual context that most of the celebration was cheerfully ignoring. Barış was still married. Gups was still his wife and the mother of his child. Elçin was still in her own relationship. The hug was what it appeared to be, a genuine and completely appropriate reunion between former colleagues and friends. What makes this story worth examining is not any scandal, because there is none. It is the mechanism itself. The way a mythology built around a fictional couple can become more emotionally real to audiences than the actual lives of the people involved. The way that fame, once you have achieved a certain level of it, means that your most private relationships become public property in a way you never fully consented to. Barış Arduç has spent most of his adult life managing this. He found his person early and quietly, fell in love on a comedy set with a woman who makes him laugh, built a family with her while the world debated whether he was secretly in love with someone else. He has never, not once, fed that narrative. Every time the rumors have flared, his response has been to simply demonstrate through small and undramatic actions that they are not true. Elçin Sangu has navigated this same mythology with similar composure. She has spoken warmly about her time on Kiralik Ask. She has not denied that the on-screen chemistry was extraordinary, because it clearly was. But she has also consistently directed people toward reality rather than fantasy, maintaining what appears to be a genuine friendship with Barış while living her own separate life. The divorce speculation of 2025 was not the first time the tabloids had declared this marriage in crisis, and it will probably not be the last. There is something about the combination of Barış and Gup's deliberate privacy and the persistent Barış and Elçin mythology that makes the narrative almost irresistible to certain corners of the media ecosystem. Every time the couple goes quiet publicly, the same story surfaces. Every time Barış appears on screen with a new co-star, the same questions emerge. It is a cycle that the couple appears to have accepted as the cost of their respective careers, even if acceptance does not make it any less frustrating. What sources close to the couple have consistently said across multiple reporting cycles is simple. This is a marriage between two people who have chosen privacy as a value, not as a sign of trouble. They are committed to each other and to their daughter. The silence is not a symptom. The silence is the point. Gups Özay, for her part, has never given the tabloids what they want. She does not address rumors directly. She does not perform her happiness for the camera in ways that feel designed to counter a specific headline. She makes films and shows she finds interesting. She is funny and distinctive and very good at her work, and she appears to have decided that her marriage is between herself and her husband rather than herself, her husband, and 17 million strangers with strong opinions. There is something worth sitting with in that choice. In an entertainment industry where the management of public perception has become almost inseparable from the work itself, where the line between your professional brand and your personal life keeps dissolving, the decision to simply refuse to perform your relationship is actually quite radical. It costs something. It invites exactly the kind of speculation we have been discussing. But it also protects something that might not survive constant public exposure. Kiralik Ask was a television show. Omer and Defne were fictional characters. The love story that moved millions of people was the work of writers, directors, costume designers, lighting crews, editors, and two actors who happened to be extraordinarily good at their jobs. That story mattered. It still matters to the people it moved. But it ended when the show ended. What continues is messier and more ordinary and more real. A man and a woman who fell in love on a comedy set. A daughter named Janasia. A career that has evolved from romantic lead to dramatic actor and continues to evolve. A former co-star who ran into him at a polling station and hugged him the way you hug someone you remember fondly. A wife who has never once felt the need to prove that her marriage is solid because she already knows it is. The divorce is not happening. As far as anyone with actual knowledge of the situation has confirmed, it was never happening. The crisis that Tabloid spent months constructing from the absence of Instagram posts and the presence of on-screen chemistry with a co-star does not appear to have corresponded to anything real. But the fact that millions of people found the story believable tells you something important. It tells you how powerful the Kiralik Ask mythology still is, more than a decade after the show ended. It tells you how completely an on-screen love story can rewrite the way audiences see two real human beings. And it tells you that no matter how clearly and quietly a couple tries to live their actual lives, the story the public wants to believe has a way of asserting itself over the story that is actually true. Barış Arduç is, by all accounts, a devoted father, a committed actor, and a private man who made his most important choice years before anyone was watching closely enough to have an opinion about it. Elçin Sangu is a friend from a chapter of his life that happened to unfold in front of cameras, which made everyone else feel like they were part of it too. The drama that people have been waiting for is probably not coming. The reunion that the fan edits keep building toward is not on the horizon. What exists instead is something that deserves more credit than it usually gets. Two real relationships, maintained by real people, surviving the particular pressure that comes with living your life inside other people's dreams. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.